What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the remote front office. We're going to be doing a recap of since the finals, what has gone down. And then there is probably a rant in store once the news portion of this is done. I'm just going to give you guys a forewarning now. But if you guys are new to the channel, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. We are uploading 2 times a week here. We are getting free agency news. So I may start uploading those more as quick little snippets to the TikTok rather than maybe waiting the full 3 or 4 days to get the information all into one video. But yeah, so let's go ahead and start with the news, and then we will trickle into what initially this video was supposed to be, right? So the first little bit of news that broke on, I believe it was Wednesday. As of right now, it looks like Pascal Siakam is going to be returning back to the Pacers. The number Woj initially put out was for 4 years, 189.5 million. It makes sense for both sides, right? I think the Pacers want to remain at least a player in the East. Pascal helps them do that. I know that necessarily there wasn't a whole lot of time to really test out the theory of does Pascal fit, this, that, and third, right? But I think once Tyrese is healthy this year and they get kind of a full season, they can really see it. Maybe add a little bit more on the perimeter as far as just kind of some defensive presence. And then obviously they will eventually have to work out the Miles Turner free agency next offseason. But for as of right now, I mean, you locked up the guy that you traded for. You traded 3 first-round picks for. 2 of those first do convey this year. So I mean, as far as future assets go, there's not really a whole lot at stake for this trade. But I think we knew pretty early on Pascal was going to stay, right? I don't think there was a lot of rumors of Pascal going to Detroit or any of these other teams with cap space. I think it was pretty widely accepted that Pascal was going to stay in Indiana. The next bit of news we got after giving Monty Williams last offseason a rather massive paycheck after he said no a couple of times, and he kind of reset the coaching market as far as what they were getting per year. The Detroit Pistons have decided to fire Monty Williams. Initially, it seems like this was not a GM decision. It seems like this was ownership's decision, which is interesting. I wonder if ownership will be involved in the next coaching search, or if they're going to now let the GM do it. Because from everything I've heard on podcasts and just various other places, it sounded like their GM, I'm blanking on his name right now, was going to let Monty, at the minimum, ride out this year, right? They both came from the New Orleans Pelicans organization. They also brought over a shooting coach from that organization, and it kind of sounded like Monty was going to get another year, and then ownership stepped in and was the main contributor to Monty getting fired. Another bit of coaching news: the Lakers have finally decided to hire JJ Redick. From the Woj reports, it sounds like they were talking at the combine, and Pelinka had a little bit longer of a conversation with Dan Hurley because Dan Hurley was there supporting his guys. And so that's why we kind of went off on the tangent of Dan Hurley initially being interviewed for the Lakers coaching job, right? And then after he decided he was going to go back to college, that's when they finalized the negotiations. As of right now, I believe it is a 4-year deal for JJ. We'll see if he makes it through that 4-year deal. I have my criticisms. The main criticism I have is as a viewer of JJ's, I'm assuming obviously that his podcasting will stop. Being a Lakers coach, I doubt he does the Old Man of the Three podcast, as well as I doubt he ends up doing the LeBron podcast. I don't know when they'll stop doing it, but I have a feeling once we get closer to the season, it'll get put on hold just obviously because as a coach, going through the day-to-day, I don't see him being on a East Coast road trip, right? They got a 5-game road trip or whatever, 5 games in 7 days. And he's like, oh, I got to stop and record really quick. You know what I mean? I just don't see that happening. I also just don't see that being out there as something ownership would want. Him openly discussing other players as well as him discussing his own players. I'm going to miss the pod because I do think he broke down stuff really well and put it in terms that people understood. And really kind of knew when to over-explain things and when to just kind of go with the initial thought he was having, right? We're going to skip the first trade of the offseason because that is going to tie into the second part of this. But then also right before I started to record here about 15, 20 minutes ago, Malik Monk got his extension announced. So the new rule for this offseason is teams are allowed to start negotiating with their own players right after the finals ended. That is why the Pascal news got announced. And then also Malik Monk is now signing a 4-year, $78 million offer. So one of the bigger kind of theorized guys for, say, in Orlando, possibly the Philly with their cap space, is going back to Sacramento for 4 for $78. I think it's a pretty good deal for Malik Monk. He still proved he's a really good sixth man. You're paying him under the $20 million a year, which obviously as the cap keeps going up, this will get closer and closer to the mid-level exception type of money. Which in that case, I mean, by the third year of it, I think it'll be a really good bargain. I think it'll just be a little steep for these first couple of years, which this now kind of starts the questions of um, is Kevin Herter around for the long term, right? Because Kevin Herter already makes about $17 million a year, and they play at least the same position. And I don't really think you can play both of them at the same time for long stretches, right? So I am curious to see what Sacramento does. There were rumors that they were possibly involved in some Levine trades with Malik Monk on the roster now too. I don't know if you want to do that because then you're paying a guy, say, 18-ish million a year for a guy that's not closing, right? Because then it would be because if he's closing, then Levine's playing your 3, and then you have a whole nother level of issues that we can go into if they ever do trade for Zach Levine, right? Okay, we got through that, right? Good 6 minutes of quality content because here's what we're going to talk about now. Okay, was at work this afternoon, and well, I guess Thursday afternoon because this is going to come out Friday morning. Got the news that OKC traded for Alex Caruso. Okay, makes sense for OKC, right? Top seed in the top seed in the West. Wow, English. Really was the shooting guard spot was a noticeable weakness for them. Caruso has really improved as a shooter, can ball handle at times, and obviously a really rangy defender. He's guarded Julius Randle in series. He's guarded different wings in series. He's guarded Giannis for when the Bulls made the playoffs a couple of years ago, and we got absolutely torched. But Caruso he fits what OKC wants, right? They want guys that can guard up. They want guys that can guard down. They want guys that will space the floor. Caruso's turned into a really good shooter. And it'll make sense. Now, he will eventually, I believe, 6 months after this trade is officially finalized, he will be eligible for, I believe it was a 4 for, not quite 80, but maybe a 4 for 78 or a 4 for 76. I don't know if he gets that level of money because he is turning 30. That would put him into his age 34 season. But I do think that maybe he gets a 2-year deal, a 3-year deal, something like that, where you can pay him maybe a little more than most teams can, right? Maybe you pay him $20 million a year. And then once, as his contract's coming off the books, right, that's when you're signing the Chet extension, the J-Dub extension, those sort of guys right there, right? But then the news came out what the Bulls got back in the Caruso trade, right? Keep in mind, we had reports as most recently as the trade deadline that the Bulls were offered first, potentially multiple firsts for Alex Caruso. We got back Josh Giddey, right? There was no assets involved. One of the most asset-rich teams in the league, actually probably the most asset-rich team in the league, right? Managed to get Alex Caruso with not giving up any firsts, not giving up any seconds. It's the entire reason. Well, it's part of the reason I waited to make this video, mainly because I wanted to calm down. But the fact that I was kind of waiting on the Woj report, because typically Woj tries to be first, and he'll say, "Hey, this player got traded for this guy." I'm like, "All right, cool." And then 20 minutes later, I'll be like, "Oh yeah, by the way, this is the draft compensation that was also involved in this deal." So I was like, "All right, I'll wait for that." Let it go. That did not happen. And then a little while later, normally about the time that Woj would tweet the draft compensation, he had a little note in there about how the Bulls viewed Josh Giddey as a potential all-star level, an all-star potential player, and a Lonzo Ball replacement. Now, cool, I guess, for them. my biggest thing is, right, us as fans, particularly myself, I've been very vocal about this thing needing to be torn down to the studs, right? I've said that for a while now. Um, this team has been very complacent with mediocrity, and this team has been very complacent with ticket sales, right? Um, Also, the thing that kind of shocked me about this is we got a report, I want to say a week and a half ago, right? I can't remember who exactly, but it kind of just made its way around Twitter that the Bulls were not trading Caruso because initially there was rumors that Caruso and LaVine would be packaged together because LaVine's contract is seen as bad in other GM's eyes. That you had to attach an asset, and that asset was Caruso in order to move on from the LaVine contract. And then there was the report that came out that this team wants to remain competitive. In order to do that, Alex Caruso has to remain on said roster, right? And then the news comes out today. We trade him for Josh Giddey straight up. And Josh Giddey is seen as the Lonzo Ball replacement and has all-star level potential. Couple issues I have with this, right? Lonzo has now been out 2 full seasons. 2.5 seasons, right? But 2 full seasons. If you wanted a Lonzo Ball replacement, why didn't we get that guy last year, right? We made these small moves. There was a joke on Twitter, I believe last year, midway through this year, that we haven't made a player-for-player trade as an organization since 2021, which is all cute, fun, cool, whatever, right? The fact that it's for Josh Giddey, who has his strengths, has his weaknesses. I liked him as a passer. I like that idea of just the way he sees the floor. The shooting concerns me, obviously, because the Bulls are not known for developing players. And we're having a guy come in who is very limited as a shooter, very limited on the defensive end. Lonzo Ball is a good defender, if not a great defender, an excellent playmaker. He has turned himself into a quality shooter. So I don't know exactly how you think this is a one-of-one replacement. The other problem I had with this trade is we are minus the roster construction, which I'll get to in a minute. You're giving yourself a 1-year window to evaluate Josh Giddey and whatever this roster ends up being from opening day to the trade deadline to the end of the season, right? Because Josh Giddey's contract, his rookie contract, I should say, ends next year, right? So not this offseason that we are entering now, but the next offseason, he is a restricted free agent. So you are giving yourselves 1 year to look at this player, evaluate this player in whatever this lineup may be, which again we will get to, and determine what his contract will be for the 4 years or 3 years or however long we extend him for. That's the main issue I have with that trade on the court wise, right? So let's get to the roster, right? Because here's initially what this video was supposed to be as we are 14 minutes in. The initial plan, I was going to break down the Bulls' upcoming offseason, right? I was going to break down what I thought of the draft, what I thought of free agency, what I thought of this roster as a whole. And then I was going to break down, knowing this organization, what they would do. So initially my thought was, obviously a LaVine trade, in my mind, top priority, right? I want the contract off the books. I just want us to move on. He's clearly not happy here. Us as fans aren't happy at this point. Let's move on, right? I kind of expected Caruso to be a part of that. Sorry, excuse me. I also expected a Caruso trade to happen, at least out of what I wanted, right? I thought there would be draft compensation involved. I was hoping possibly for this year's draft compensation because I had a guy particularly I was looking at. Didn't happen, right? The next thing I was looking for was a DeMar signing trade, right? I want this thing tore down to the studs. I think Kobe, you give him another year, see what he develops into. Io, I think we know about where he's at. Again, give him another year though. But you can't give these guys a chance, right? You can't truly hand them the keys. With LaVine here, with DeMar here. I understood that. Which is why I was skeptical. But I kind of was okay if we let the Caruso contract play out, right? Allow him to still be a veteran presence. Allow these guys to really get the full keys to the kingdom. Let DeMar walk or sign and trade him. Trade LaVine. And kind of just allow the young guys to be the young guys, right? Another thing, I want tore down to the studs. In a perfect world, would I love a Vooch trade? Absolutely. I didn't want Vooch traded here to begin with. I thought it was moving the timeline up too much. I've discussed that on various channels, etc. I don't think a team wants Vucevic right now. I'll be honest. He is pretty consistently $20 million a year. So he has this coming year and then the year after on his contract, right? Because he signed a 3 for 20 last year. Or a 3 for 60 last year, 20 per. Oh, my throat's drying up. I don't think a team will take 2 years of Vooch, right? So in my mind, Vooch was playing out this year. Lonzo was playing out this year. You trade Vooch next year, he's an expiring. Maybe you can find a reclamation project, etc. But you get Vooch off the books, right? And then you re-sign Patrick Williams. I don't want to go above 17, 18 million a year, right? Around 15 is where I would like him to be. But realistically, I understand he's a young guy. 15 to 18 per year. 3 or 4 years. I've seen the flashes. I understand the flashes, particularly defensively. I just don't think he's going to be much more offensively. I don't know what he'll grow into personally, right? So that was kind of my who's on the roster currently, how I want that dealt with, right? I don't have any specific LaVine trades because I don't know where he ends up, right? DeMar sign-in trades, really kind of difficult. Not a lot of teams with cap space. If you have to let him walk, right? We need to move on to the new era of Chicago Bulls basketball. Oh, this thing was cool for the 5 seconds it worked. Let's move on, right? My top draft guys. I know we are a week out from the draft, less than a week out from the draft. I have done bare minimum scouting right now, right? Shout out the YouTube guys like Hoop Intellect, all those guys that break down draft prospects. Been trying to kind of catch those and kind of spark notes my way into the draft. I've got a handful of guys that I like based off of what I've seen, what I've heard, that sort of stuff. But deeper than that, I don't know. That's why we probably won't do a second round day of actual stream, just because I'm not going to know a whole lot of guys in this draft. I tend to have like 3 or 4 guys every year that I really focus in on. I say, this is my guy. These are my guys. These are who I like. I like this, that, and the third about them. You guys know. Particularly am a fan of plus defenders more than I am plus offensive players, as well as versatile defenders, long arms, just the lanky, rangy, Jonathan Isaacs, those sort of guys, right? So my top draft guys for the Bulls, it's really hard to tell because this draft is so up and down, right? I've heard reports of Donovan Clingan at 1. I've heard reports of Castles as early as 4. I've heard reports of guys going 10, of going just all over the place, right? There's no consistency. So my group of guys, right? Donovan Clingan, I like the idea, right? Younger guy, only a sophomore. I think he could possibly be a Vooch replacement. I don't know if I love the idea, as I don't really treat him as a stretch center. I think at least in the modern NBA, you need that option on your team. As of right now, I don't see us having it, right? The next guy I want, really don't think he'll be there at 11, but I'm really starting to kind of, as I dig more into him, really a fan. And that's Stephon Castle. I understand in his mind he thinks he's a point guard. But I was really thinking, especially if Caruso was still on this roster, a year to have Caruso to mentor him, teach him the ropes. I liked him as more of the combo guard / wing. 6'6", rangy defender, really gets into it, right? I like that idea of a molded player with a year under Caruso, obviously with Caruso not being there. a little bit harder to mentor him, right? Uh, Another guy that's more of a project guy, Cody Williams out of Colorado. I understand he is not his brother. I think that's kind of where his hype's coming from right now. But long, rangy wing, um, project guy, so I don't really necessarily trust the Bulls to develop. But I think all in all, a shot in the dark. This team needs wings. This team needs size. And I think he can provide that. And then my last guy is Devin Carter. I understand he's a little bit older. He's also a guard, 6'3". But I like the defensive upside. Um, just kind of the puzzle piece fit that he is. We saw in this playoffs, in this finals especially, multiple guards that can guard multiple positions and just kind of have the court awareness, the spacing awareness, can be a connective playmaker, those sort of guys. Just kind of guys I personally prefer on rosters, right? Um, and then as far as off-season signings, right? There wasn't a lot as I was kind of digging through this, just because it's not a great free agency class. I'll be honest, especially now that Malik Monk's off the board, Pascal's off the board, Paul George. It sounds like isn't going to Philly per reports that happened this morning. Um, just really kind of we're kind of starting to see the puzzle pieces fit already, right? So my initial thoughts, again, not going to be big splashy guys, not even necessarily guys that you take a swing on and hope it works, right? Um, Goga Batadze, because I assume Vooch is here for this year, right? Goga, I think, proved himself as a backup and a part-time starter. And I think you could get him in kind of like an Isaiah Hartenstein type deal, and he could maybe turn into not what Isaiah Hartenstein was as a person, but the role he filled for New York, right? He was a backup, and then the starter gets hurt, and he's a starter, and it really just you feel the difference with him on the roster, and I think it'd be something that the Bulls could do. Najee Marshall, New Orleans just is really hit or miss on him. I just don't think there's enough room on the roster for him, quite frankly. And I think it's just kind of a shot in the dark guy. See what happens. Go from there. Bol, yes, I am giving a chance to Bol. I understand the Phoenix thing didn't look great, but I just think again, if I'm the Bulls and we're trying to, in my mind, we're trying to tear completely down. There's going to be minutes for him. We need size. He can space the floor, even if he's just the third center on the roster, right? Just some sort of, hope, chance. The occasional you go to the United Center and you're like, oh, Bull's going to play today because so and so's hurt, right? Like just the off chance that it's at least fun to watch, right? I don't want the complete teardown to be where we were 3 or 4 years ago. And you look at the lineup and you're like, what the hell? Paul Zipser's playing, right? I want at least to have a chance for it to be fun, to be entertaining as we watch this full 82 game season this year. And then the last guy is just a personal favorite of mine. I know he got signed late in the year, but he was on the roster the year before. He played power forward for us when he really shouldn't have. Oh, that's Javonte Green, right? Love the guy. He's energy, goes for the boards. Not a top tier shooter by any means, but I think eventually, if this roster was to get more size and get more players at the correct positions, I think he could slot more back into the wing spot and less into the power forward center that he kind of got stuck with us with the last couple of years. Now, this has obviously changed kind of a lot because we traded Caruso today, and so it kind of changed my thought process on how the Bulls are going to operate this offseason. Because, again, I was going off the report that it sounded like Caruso was basically more or less untouchable, right? But now that he's out the door, I don't know where to go, right? I still think Levine gets traded, right? I still think that is a thing, right? I think we have hit the crossroads where he doesn't want to be here. The organization doesn't necessarily want him here, but isn't like kicking him out the door, right? Because they understand the jersey sales, the ticket sales, etc. But I think they kind of understand he's just not a good fit for the team, right? I trust AK to be able to make that assessment. My initial thought was that we were signing DeMar to a 3-year deal. Again, the Caruso thing throws us so out of whack. I wouldn't be surprised to see DeMar back. Knowing this organization, my biggest fear personally and again, this is kind of what I was saying on Twitter today. My biggest fear is this is all we do, right? This is the only domino to fall. It's not the okay. So we traded Caruso. Let's trade Levine. Let's let DeMar walk. Let's look at Vooch trades. Maybe we don't find something. We're at least looking. We're active. We're talking to teams. We let Drummond walk, which again we should have traded him for a goddamn first this year. Um, Maybe we explore kind of dumping the Javon Carter contract, as I understand he's not been horrible, but I just don't think he's necessarily what we wanted. And we kind of want to get some younger guys in here to fill those minutes and develop, right? Um, so now that Caruso's gone, it kind of throws it away. Maybe tomorrow only gets a 2-year deal. I do still think this front office will re-sign Patrick Williams. I think their number for him could be higher than what I'm thinking, mainly just because he's a restricted free agent. I expect like a Charlotte, a Detroit, somebody out there to throw him 20 to 21 million a year, right? I think on the high end, maybe 19, but somewhere between 19 and 21 million per year, 4-year deal. I would not be surprised to see that coming across my timeline whenever free agency starts, right? However, I hope we don't. I understand matching it, right? Again, I've seen the flashes. I understand the in AK's mind. A, it was AK's first pick here, and B, I understand the potential of him, right? Long, rangy wing, good defender, can create shots at times. Just the occasional mental lapse, right? We've all made the jokes about the travels and the he shuffles his feet too quick. He looks timid with the ball sometimes. I think you still have to give him a chance, right? Especially if this is a true rebuild, right? If we are not just doing the, oh, hey, we're going to trade Caruso for Giddey, and because Lonzo doesn't play enough, Giddey now starts. And so now it's Giddey, Levine, DeMar, P. Will, Vooch, boom, season, go, right? If that's not what we're doing, and we're giving P. Will a chance to develop, we're giving Giddey a chance to develop. Again, if we are truly wanting to develop Giddey and give him a fair shot, I don't know if I want Vooch as his center, right? I don't think Vooch is a great pick and roll partner. I think of Vooch more as a stationary guy now, whether it's on the block or maybe it's a slight pick and pop, but I don't think of him as that traditional either the rim runner that Giddey may need to unlock, because I trust Giddey's ability to throw a lob or read into a corner, etc. But I think he also needs somebody that can pop and pop consistently, right? We've all the last couple of years have made the Vooch comments of we go from Vooch shoots 45% to Vooch shoots 20% to Vooch goes 5 of 7 over a stretch of 2 weeks to Vooch goes 1 for 12 over a stretch of 2 weeks. It's a constant roller coaster with how Vooch shoots, right? And then draft wise, again because it's the Bulls, I expected the older guys slash the less of a ceiling guys, right? What do I mean by that? Dalton Connect, from everything I've heard, good scorer, below average defender, uh, not necessarily a great 3-point shooter, but a good scorer, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if that's the guy. If he's a junior, upperclassman, wouldn't be surprised, right? Uh, Kyle Filipowski went to a big program. He's a center, project guy, um, younger. So I could see that maybe as they trust, oh, okay, he's got 2 years to develop under Vooch. Vooch is gone in 2 years. Kyle, here you go. You're the starting center. Go ahead. Zach Edey, just because I don't know Zach Edey's range right now. I've heard mid to late 20s. I've heard teens. I don't know. Personally, Zach Edey's not my kind of guy. I get it. He's tall, lanky, finishes really well around the basket. Obviously, because he's tall, provides good rim protection. I just, for how I think a roster should be constructed in 2024, I'm not a Zach Edey guy, right? Maybe he's a bench guy, 10 minutes per game guy, and then maybe in the playoffs he's not really in unless it's for like, an inbound play or something like that. And then the last guy, Terrence Shannon Jr. I know he had the off the court stuff. It seems like that is behind him, at least for now. And we also did this with Io a couple years ago, where I granted Io was a second rounder, but we did take the Illinois kid. Terrence Shannon is an older player, senior, but I wonder if maybe, minus the UConn game where they got demolished, I wonder maybe if the front office saw some things as far as his two-way kind of versatility that they prefer, right? And then again, because of how I projected this offseason to go, here were my initial free agent targets for this team. Mason Plumlee had a really good flash for the Clippers. I think as a backup center, has really cemented himself. I think he could get probably a 2-year deal for most teams. Nicholas Batum, I wonder if he retires. He was contemplating it the last couple of years. But I think, again, power forward with size, older, veteran, connector. I wouldn't mind him as a kind of a mentor for Patrick Williams slightly. I understand it as far as just the shooting, the connective ability, that sort of thing. I actually like that idea. But again, I just don't think Batum wants to come into this situation. Alec Burks, for the simple fact that we need somebody that can shoot a three. Please, for the love of God, can somebody shoot a three? We're always towards the bottom in attempts. We're towards the bottom in makes. Somebody shoot a three for the love of God, please. And the last guy I had for kind of similar reasons, Joe Ingles. I understand he had not a great year in Orlando, but I would be okay with him coming in on like a minimum to be a mentor, to be a connector, play spotty minutes. Maybe he plays once or twice a week. But other than that, he's kind of talking with the guys and kind of sharing his thoughts, his experiences. Shooter, kind of what he sees defensively. I know he's not a top tier defender by any means, but I think just kind of who he's been around and who he's played with can provide some really good experience for these guys as kind of more of the mentor role, right? Now, again, all that caveat, throw it out the window, right? Because of the Caruso trade, I don't know what we're going to do. I'm in a tailspin because, if anything, I thought Caruso would get traded for draft compensation. Or at the bare minimum, the Caruso trade would include draft compensation, right? If it was just him, not him, and Levine in the package. This also kind of, with that and the Malik Monk news, I'm curious if the Sacramento thing happens for Zach LaVine. He's made it abundantly clear he doesn't want to go to Detroit. I would be curious maybe if a team, I don't think Charlotte would do it just based off of how they've moved so far with a younger coach. And I really kind of think they're gearing towards doing a true rebuild through the draft and kind of maybe smaller deals. But other than that, I don't. Maybe Philly. Maybe that's the destination for him. I just can't see it with A, you have to pay Maxey, and then B, relying on Zach LaVine and Joel Embiid to stay healthy for that team. I think that team needs more role players. You just really go get like a KCP and those sort of guys to truly fill out that roster. But yeah, I feel like I stayed pretty calm for the Bulls rant here. I'm trying to keep composed. I know this went a little bit longer than our normal videos. But again, it's the Bulls. It's the team that I feel like I know the best because I watch it the most. And I feel like I can really talk about it the most. So that is why we're getting the in-depth look. As far as content goes, so next week we will have the normal Monday show. For that one, it will be a news recap, and then more than likely, it'll be my Spurs offseason outlook because since we're so close to the draft, I'm not going to do a bunch of teams. I really want to do the Spurs because, again, 2 picks in the top 8, as well as cap space. I kind of want to run that exercise through my brain. Obviously, I'm much more focused on the rebuilding teams and the Bulls as opposed to teams like Boston or teams like Denver. Those sort of teams that need to figure out their cap situations. But yeah, if you guys, again, I know it's been a longer video. If you guys enjoyed the podcast, we will be live. I have to reset up the YouTube stuff for the draft next week. I believe it is Wednesday. We will do the first round, the full first round, whole thing. I will be sitting here reacting, trades, picks, etc. Talking through the whole thing. We will be live on YouTube. We will be live on TikTok, chatting it up. The TikTok will be on my gaming channel because the podcast does not have the live ability on TikTok yet. But we will be live on YouTube this year. I know I screwed it up last year. We will be here. We will be reacting to stuff. So yeah, I will tweet all that stuff out. But I appreciate you guys coming through. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.